It's time to talk about the very best comic books you can get your hands on. This was a strange week. It was a 5-release month for DC and Marvel. Obviously, normally you get like annuals and some throwaway stuff, and that's exactly what we got this week. Just not a whole lot to be talking about as far as Marvel, DC, or really indie comics. Hell, Gabe here is going to recommend some manga this week. Subbing in for Drew is Gabe from Weird Science DC and Comical Pins. How you doing, Gabe?
I'm doing just great. Thank you for having me. It's been a strange week. It's definitely got some odd choices, and it's also a annuals week, I believe, for DC. So they put out a lot of annuals and one shots. So not a whole lot to pick from. So we're definitely going to look outside the big two for some winners this week.
Well, we did the best that we could. I personally didn't have any indie comics I read. Not many of the series that I've been reading actually came out this week. There are a couple of debuts I didn't really quite prefer any of them. So you're doing all the indie recommendations this week. First up is from Ablaze Comics, the Breaker Omnibus Volume 3. The manga that I did speak about, it is being distributed by Ablaze in the U.S. Jeon-guk Jin and Kamaru on art.
This is manga, but it's manhwa, which is actually Korean manga, which should give you a tip off from the name. The reason I'm recommending this because it's one of those mangas that has everything that you're looking for. Because it's an omnibus, it's over 350 pages long, so it's not a short book. But at the same time, it reads lightning quick. You can go through those 350 some odd pages in about an hour and 90 minutes because it just moves so great. The art's fantastic. The story centers around a kid who is sort of the bullied kid in school. He's very meek. He's very kind of wimpy and kind of weak, and he's just picked on mercilessly by this bully by the name of Chang Ho and his gang of friends. But through circumstance and happenstance and everything else, he happens to come across a teacher who's actually a renowned and powerful martial arts master who's being hunted by an underground organization of clans that are all martial arts masters and powerful in their own right, with power where a fist will go through a wall, that kind of thing. And the two form an interesting bond through their relationship, and they use that bond to just kind of support each other and be there for you. And the kid learns to stand up for himself, and it's the underdog overcoming your bully story that you always love to see. In the first omnibus volume, he really learns the whole concept of courage, breaking out of your shell, recognizing that if you want something, you have to overcome your fear, and he absolutely does that. The second volume moves into him just learning the skills, learning to master martial arts, and with a little help from something called the divine pill that he swallows that almost kills him, but grants him power. He learns the moves and the techniques. And this third issue is where he finally stands up to his bully, and it's worth every minute of it. If you love manga, if you love underdog stories, if you like the kid overcoming his bully, this is absolutely a good pick for you.
Yeah, Blaze has done a really good job finding comic books outside the American market, importing here, and finding stuff that really transfers over the audience. I think we're going to see a lot of these smaller publishers, not DC and Marvel, kind of follow that Dark Horse plan where they went out there and they got the rights to Berserk, and they're making a lot of money. People are paying lots of money, and they're buying lots of copies of those Berserk volumes, going over to the Korean manga section and stuff like that and finding some things that maybe people haven't read yet is really smart. Ablaze is a great company, but you're not done. You were talking about Dynamite this week. Vampirella, Dracula, Unholy #6. This is a comic book that our good friend Drew has been on recommending. Christopher Priest, Donnie Hadijiwa.
The whole concept of the story comes straight out of Christopher Priest's Vampirella run, which went all the way up to, I think, issue 25, where effectively Dracula is trying to be reborn or resurrected through a human host by way of a genetic virus. And this entire series has been leading up to this idea that Dracula is trying to reemerge back into this world, and Vampirella is trying to do everything to keep him down. Well, we're at the end of the issue. This is a 6-issue arc, so this effectively is the finale for the particular arc. So what's happened is you've got a lot of romance because the person that Vampirella is together with happens to also be in love with somebody else. I'm not going to spoil it too much, and that sort of brings about an interesting love triangle that needs to be overcome. But at the end of the issue, and this is what really cements it, is at the end of the issue, Vampirella discovers something about herself that has never been done before. It's a game changer. So if you're interested in Vampirella, just canon and lore and all the storytelling potential, this issue's got horror, it's got action, it's got complex romance and emotional drama. And that last page, if you're a Vampirella fan, is going to make you say, what the what? And then you're going to have to figure out what's going to come next, because I think we got a new series coming up here in another month or two, also from Christopher Priest.
He has definitely found a place, a little home for him over at Dynamite Comics, working in this Vampirella universe. People seem to like it, and he's definitely expanded it quite a bit. I think this is the second or third spinoff series that he's done so far.
Yep.
So now let's go over to a publisher. I've never even heard of this publisher, Black Box Comics. Dr. Wilder #4, Brian Hawkins, Umberto Giampa.
Great art. I mean, really great art. Good, solid lines, good character designs, great color. This is one of those smaller publishers that you don't see too much of. Doc Wilder is an interesting concept on its own. It's a story about a kind of like a mercenary agency, but it's a cyberpunk type future. Not too far in the future, but far enough that they've got some guns and gadgetry that are a little bit more advanced than we're used to today. And their job through this entire arc is to hunt down poachers who are using endangered species to do genetic experimentation. And you think, well, that's poaching. That's kind of weird. What does that have to do with cyberpunk? It's all about tracking through the entire planet of different organizations, different networks. And then when the action hits, it hits hard. There are consequences. People die. There's emotional weight to the situations that are going on. And then when one of the team gets killed, and I'm not going to spoil that, but it hits everybody like a hammer fist. And it's really great storytelling with an interesting concept and an interesting setting.
So that's your indie comic book recommendations this week. We've got Ablaze Comics, The Breaker, Omnibus #3, Vampirella, Dracula, Unholy #6, and Dr. Wilder #4. We've only got a couple more recommendations left, one from Marvel, one from DC. I personally think of all the comic books I read this week, this is the best comic book from Marvel. King Conan #5, Jason Aaron, Mahmoud Asrar. You would think something with the name Conan on it would be Conan-centric, but this is not. This is really building up and kind of fleshing out a villain. Toth Amon, I think his name is. He's a wizard. He's very despicable. And you kind of get the backstory and learn how he became this, disgusting being, obviously, that King Conan is going to have to deal with over time. This has been one of the better Conan series that Marvel Comics has put out. Probably the best thing they've done really since Savage Sword of Conan with Jerry Duggan and Ron Garney early on. Jason Aaron has this King Conan series really going and doing a lot of flashbacks now.
Yep. Say what you will about Jason Aaron's Avengers run, and most of probably what you would say is not good. For right, wrong, or indifferent, it hasn't been hitting. But on this King Conan run, it's great stuff. The art is fantastic. It's got that old school kind of gritty Bronze Age type Conan feel to it, with the heavy shadows, thick lines, and everything else. But you're right; this is very much a origin story for Thoth Amon, which is one of the evil wizards that King Conan has crossed paths with multiple times. What's interesting is the story explains his motivations and helps you understand that character more deeply, because it shows how he was brought up and how he's raised and what he did to become the kind of the evil wizard that he is. But at the same time, it doesn't make him any less evil. It's not the misunderstood villain. He's still a villain through and through, but at least you get a little bit of a better idea of where he's coming from. And that makes him a more interesting character, because when he does the things he does in the present day, now you have a better idea of why he's trying to go after Conan, why he's trying to do the things he does, and it makes him a more compelling character in the process.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have negative things to say, and I'm one of them about it, Jason Aaron, but his King Conan run with Mahmoud Asrar is absolutely the truth. That was a great issue. Mm-hmm. This is the last comic book recommendation. I kind of feel weird about this one. DC Comics Action Comics Annual 2022, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Dale Eaglesham. This is the worst story that Phil Kennedy Johnson has written for this War World saga. There are parts of it that are effective, but it's still pretty good, and it's certainly better than anything else DC Comics put out this week. So basically, you have two flashbacks going on at the same time, one showing you the upbringing of Mongol, one showing you the upbringing of Clark Kent. I already know Clark Kent's upbringing. I probably didn't need that part. I think they probably should have done this almost solely on Mongol himself. I thought that part was really interesting. Not as good as last week's actual Action Comics issue that kind of fleshed out War World and Mongol, I think even better than this one. But if you're going to buy a DC comic book this week, this is the one to buy.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, the bizarre part about DC in this where we are in the state of the comics industry at this point is that the best well-rounded comic is still not fantastic, but it's also one of the lower selling ones too. So it's just very strange that they can't seem to get enough momentum behind the writers that really want to do a good job with the material they're given. So even though this isn't a fantastic comic, it's okay, and there are some up and downs in this particular issue. But yeah, if DC would just get out of its own way and learn how to promote the people that are doing good stuff, I think this one would sell a lot better too, and also would give Philip Kennedy Johnson a chance to get more support to do more interesting stuff. I think he's got it in the niche. You're right that last week's or the previous just regular action comic was better than the annual, but it is what it is, and that's about the best of anything you're going to get out of DC this week.
Yeah, it was just really strange. That Batman annual, I am not into Ghostmaker and Clown Hunter. It is not working for me.
No. There's Ghostmaker, Clown Hunter. I see Tinian was just trying to do something there, and I appreciate him trying to create something new, but it just looked like a collection of refugees from Hot Topic. And as much as you try to make it land, I don't think there's anything there that's worth pursuing much beyond what's already been done. I mean, if they can figure out a great story, great. But if they can't, I think they're just wasting their time.
Yeah, so this was not a banner week in comic books, and I have to freely admit that. You had to search high and low to find something worth reading this week. Obviously, next week's going to be much bigger. We got Amazing Spider-Man #3. We know there's a big fight there. We've also got the first issue of Dark Crisis and some other big comic books coming out. We should see some of the regular titles from the indie scene come out again. So we'll definitely have a better week next week. But you can definitely count on Vampirella, Dracula, Unholy #6, Doc Wilder #4, Key Code #5, Action Comics Annual 2022 if you need something DC, and then the Breaker Omnibus Volume 3 from Ablaze if you want to find some nice manga being distributed by an American company.
Yep.
DC Comics did have something that, well, it had a big name on it. It just didn't really deliver. My good friend Josh and I kind of broke down Justice League Road to Dark Crisis. It didn't really hit right. I get what they were going for, but I don't think it was really effective. If you haven't seen this, definitely check it out. And it just wasn't a great week for DC, and hopefully Dark Crisis gets better next week.